If you wouldn't follow yourself, why should anyone else? The first person you should lead is yourself. Don't wait until the pressure's on to make a character choice. If you become the leader you ought to be on the inside, you will become the leader you want to be on the outside. The second quality of a leader that I want to talk to you about is charisma. And the secret of charisma, being a person that has a magnetic personality, the secret of charisma is this: become more concerned about making others feel good about themselves than you are making them feel good about you. That's the secret of charisma. Let me just take a moment and read to you just a story that really defines it well. I love history, so this is kind of a story of two prime ministers out of Britain. During the second half of the 19th century, two strong men vied for leadership of Great Britain's government, William Gladstone and Benjamin Disraeli. These two politicians were intense rivals. You could detect how they felt about each other based on the comment once made by Disraeli. I love this comment. He said, "The difference between a misfortune and a calamity is this. If Gladstone," this was his political foe, "if Gladstone fell into the Thames River, it would be a misfortune. But if someone dragged him out again, that would be a calamity." Now, many people believe that Gladstone, the leader of the Liberal Party for 3 decades, personified the best qualities of Victorian England. A career public servant, he was a great orator, a master of finance, staunchly a moral man. He was made Prime Minister for the United Kingdom 4 different times, the only person in the nation's history to achieve that honor. And under his leadership, Great Britain established a national education system, instituted the parliamentary reform, saw the vote given to a significant number of people who were of the working class. And then there is also Benjamin Disraeli, who served twice as Prime Minister, had a different kind of background. In his 30s, he entered politics, built a reputation as a diplomat, social reformer, but his greatest accomplishment was masterminding Great Britain's purchase of the Suez Canal. Though both had accomplished much for Britain, what really separated them as leaders was their approach to people. The difference can be best illustrated by a story told by a young woman who dined with these two rival statesmen on consecutive nights. When asked her impression of them, here's what she said: "When I left the dining room after sitting next to Mr. Gladstone, I thought he was the cleverest man in England. But after sitting next to Mr. Disraeli, I thought I was the cleverest woman in England." When you spend more time making people feel better about themselves than about yourself, you develop this wonderful thing called charisma. Ella Wheeler Wilcox said it so well. "There are two kinds of people on earth today, just two kinds of people, no more, I say. Not the good and the bad, for 'tis well understood that the good are half bad and the bad are half good. No, the two kinds of people on earth, I mean, are the people who lift and the people who lean." How many of you know some lifters in your life, huh? You know, they just lift you up. They make you feel better. I mean, when you're around, they just kind of pick up your spirit. How many of you also know some leaners in life? You know, and, they just kind of lean on you a little bit, but, after a whole day, you're just exhausted. You know what I'm saying? Just say, oh, my goodness, okay. In your notes, how would you rate yourself when it comes to charisma? Are other people naturally attracted to you? Are you well liked? If not, you may possess one of these, what I call roadblocks to charisma, such as pride. Nobody wants to follow a leader who thinks he is better than everyone else. Is that not true? Or how about insecurity? If you are uncomfortable with who you are, others will be too. Or moodiness. If people never know what to expect from you, they stop expecting anything. Or perfectionism. People respect the desire for excellence but dread totally unrealistic expectations. Or how about cynicism. People don't want to be rained on by someone who sees a cloud around every silver lining. Now, a mistake that I made, which is absolutely huge, and this was a mistake that, you look back at your life and you think, boy, if I could just go back and do that over again. As a young leader, when I would go, again, my background was in the beginning pastoring, I would go to a church. My first question would be, as I would look at my congregation, is how can these people help me with my vision? And I'd look at the congregation and I'd say, okay, this person could do this for me, and this person could do this for me. And I was totally centered on how they could help me. One of the defining days of my life was when I switched the question from how can these people help me to how can I help these people? The moment that I began to understand that my job as a leader was to lift people to a higher level than they probably could ever achieve on their own. The moment that I realized that my value as a leader is adding value to people, the moment that I realized that people are my most appreciable asset, the moment that I realized that the only way that I'm ever going to receive much from anybody is to give much first, that it is true that if I help people be all that they possibly can be on the front end, on the back end, they'll help me be all I can possibly be. And what I didn't understand as a young leader is you got to do the giving before you do the receiving. You got to do the planting before you can do the reaping. You've got to be the initiator first. Leaders always go first. And this is especially true if you want to develop charisma. For there are lifters and there are leaners. The lifter looks at an individual and they says, how can I lift this person? How can I add value to them? How can I help them? The leaner basically comes and says, oh my goodness, how can they help me? And I have never found a successful leader who asked the question, how can people help me first? It's always, how can I help people? So let me talk to you for a moment about just adding value to people, because what I have discovered is that the great leaders are always adding value to others. How do you do that? Three things. Number one, you have to value people. If you and I do not value people, we'll manipulate people, we'll control people, we'll use them for our own end, we'll never be successful. And by the way, if you don't truly value people, you'll take advantage of them. That's a fact. Number two, know and relate to what they value. Leaders are listeners. And they know and they relate to what other people value because they're listening. They know where their people are. They understand it. They realize that the responsibility of a leader is not to call people to where the leader is, but the responsibility of the leader is to go where the people are and then bring them to where they should be. Leaders are never calling people to come to them. Leaders are always going to them, investing in their lives, and then going with them to a higher level. That's a fact. And we add value to others when we make ourselves more valuable. That's just a fact. Make yourself more valuable, you're going to add value to others. Let me give you a classic example of charisma. My wife, Margaret, and I, a couple of months ago, went on a Mediterranean cruise for a couple of weeks. And there was this lady on the cruise by the name of Phyllis. And it was very obvious to us, probably within the first few hours that we were on this ship, that Phyllis was loaded with charisma. I kid you not. Within 24 hours, she knew our name. I mean, we weren't wearing our name. She found out who we were, and she knew our name. But what amazed me is she not only knew our name, she knew everybody's name. And she not only knew everybody's name, but she complimented everybody. I kid you not. She would come up to you and she would immediately say something good about you. And when we would go on our little offshore tours, the guide that was taking us around on some of these little Greek islands, I kid you not, the guide hardly said a word until she'd say something to the guide about how good she was and how wonderful it was. And here's what I want you to know. Everybody loved Phyllis. Everybody loved Phyllis. By the second day, I said, you know, Phyllis, I do stuff on relationships. And she said, yeah, I know. She said, I've got a couple of your books. I said, well, Phyllis, I said, you're going to be in one of my books. You're Miss Relationship if I've ever seen it. And she said, oh, I'm so glad this is so. And she pulled out a card, and on her card it had her name, and she had it put on the card, your cruising friend. And she said, well, here's my card, and let's get in touch. And by the way, I live in Florida, and when could you and your wife, Margaret, come down and spend a day with us? Now, what am I talking about? I'm talking about charisma. I'm talking about somebody invest in other people. And the people principle that I love is this one. It's what I call the exercise principle. The best exercise for strengthening the heart is reaching down and lifting up people. And how do you develop the quality of charisma in your life? Every morning ask yourself, who can I add value to today? Start